If there's one thing most Americans can agree on, it's that our politics is pretty hostile. A new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll finds 84% of registered voters in competitive districts think civility in politics is getting worse.
In his new book titled Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal, Nebraska Republican Senator Ben Sasse says the loss of community in America has helped to widen the political divide. And Senator Ben Sasse joins us now here on CBSN. Welcome.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
So you say that our divisions are not about politics. They're rather that the biggest problem in America is loneliness. Explain.
Yeah, there's a lot of data that shows there's a hollowing out of local community, and people are feeling less and less connection to the kind of tribes you've always known. Family, deep friendship, shared work over time, local worshiping communities. And in each of those four areas, which are kind of the four key drivers of happiness, do you have a nuclear family? Do you have work that you think is meaningful? Do you have a couple of good friends? And do you have a theological or philosophical framework to make sense of death and suffering? When all those things are hollowed out, politics becomes a place people are running to try to find grand meaning. That's not what politics are for. Politics should be about figuring out how to do a cost-effective infrastructure plan for 10 years from now.
So in the book, you sort of outline changes in the way we live that have resulted in this or exacerbated it. The changes in the way we work, the places that we live. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So at work, I was born in the 1970s. Average duration at a firm was 2.5 decades for a primary breadwinner. Today, it's 4.2 years and getting shorter. A lot of that's great. The digital revolution, the Uberization of the economy is going to create more total economic output than the world's ever known, but it means you don't have shared workers for 10 and 15 and 20 years.
Right.
And it turns out that's a key driver of whether or not you're happy. We want to do shared stuff with people. We want to be needed. We want to have work that matters. And so you have shorter duration, more mobile jobs. You have a decline of friendship. We've had a halving of friendship in America in the last 25 years. 3.2 friends per American in 1990, 1.8 friends per American today. People are hurting. Politics are important, but politics aren't going to work if you're trying to project grand meaning on it. And right now, people are trying to find in politics things that they're not finding in their neighborhood. The neighborhood's going to make you happy. Politics should get you a good highway.
Well, so to that point, you say the 2016 election didn't cause our divisions. They existed long before President Trump or even Hillary Clinton came into the public consciousness. But in your opinion, has President Trump sort of stoked some of the things that you're talking about? Loneliness leads to fear. People are afraid. And if you can exploit that fear, then you can succeed at some level with certain segments of the population. So is the president exploiting some of these divisions that you found in your research?
Yeah, so I named it them on purpose because right now we're using politics not to say what are we, the American people, for together. We should be for freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, protest. This is who America is. The First Amendment's the beating heart of our polity. But right now we don't use politics to be we for stuff first. We use politics to decide what are we against first, and how can we maybe have a common enemy? I mean, a lot of cable news viewing feels like it's just the shared experience of being able to hate somebody together. And so I think we have a lot of politics who use the rhetoric of the way they try to rally people as saying who we're against. I don't think politics are interesting enough to spend a lot of your grand emotional energy deciding I'm a part of this anti-tribe, I'm against those people together. And I think many of our politicians are talking like that. It's not helpful.
So when you say many of our politicians, though, I mean, Vlad specifically asked you about the president, and you've supported a lot of his agenda. So, you know, here we have a president that a number of people have accused of taking advantage of these divisions. You know, you can debate whether or not he's sort of a part of a cause behind it or not, but certainly he's made it part of his presentation to capitalize on these divisions. Can you sort of support his agenda while not supporting this kind of behavior? Because it sounds like you don't think that this behavior is good.
Yes, let's distinguish between a couple things. I think it's a great question. There are a bunch of places where I agree with the president's policies and a bunch of places where I differ with his policies. Let's talk about a place where I differ because it gets at your point about kind of the othering of this. We have shorter duration jobs. Why is that happening? Overwhelmingly, it's happening because the IT revolution is leading to more automation in the way we produce stuff. It's not primarily because of immigrants. And so the president will take something like people's anxiety about how long you're going to work at your firm, and he wants to say, I, the politician, can bring your jobs back. You're going to have an industrial job for your whole life. That's just not true. What's happening is really smart humans are using their brains to figure out how to make factories more and more efficient with machine learning and robotics and other forms of automation. And it means that the share of people that work in manufacturing has been declining for decades. Donald Trump didn't create that, but President Trump or no other politician is going to solve that either. We used to have 31% of Americans working in factories 40 years ago. Today it's 7%. That number is going down, not up. And when we pretend the problem there is immigration or trade policy, and I care deeply about free trade, it's just not true. The main thing driving industrial change in shorter duration jobs is more automation. So we should tell the truth about that stuff instead of deciding who we want to be against.
One more question on this point. Arguably, our greatest president was our first president, George Washington. And, you know, if you believe that almost every president since then has taken the lead from George Washington, in that not only are you there to guide the country through its policies and through its agenda, you're also the moral champion of the country. You represent the people not only here but also abroad. So if President Trump is putting together policies, and according to 538, you've voted about 87% in line with President Trump's policies. If he's stacking the courts with conservative justices, which is something you might support, if he's remaking the tax code, which is something you support, that's great if you're a conservative politician. But can you separate the morality from the policies? Can you separate the man? If you're not the moral equivalent of George Washington, then can you still be an effective president?
Great distinction. So again, we could go policy by policy, and I'd explain why the positions that I held when I ran, I'm a first-time politician. I'm one of 8 people in the Senate who's never run for anything before. Things that I told Nebraskans I was for in 2013 and 2014, I'm not going to change those positions just because Donald Trump later adopted my positions. But to your point about George Washington, Washington leaves office in 1797, and he gives a farewell address to the nation, I think in December of 1796, right. And he said, factionalism will be the thing that could cause America's collapse. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln in the 1830s has the exact same speech, basically, and he tells the Lyceum, he said, all of the armies of Europe can never drink from the Ohio River. America's never going to lose a military battle. The only way this republic would ever decline is by suicide. And that would be if factions have us internally decide that we want to hate other Americans rather than pass along a free republic to our kids. Obviously, the rhetoric of the presidency matters a lot because most of what happens in Washington isn't about some bill we're going to vote on today or next Tuesday. Mostly it's about, do our kids understand why we have limited government and why we think the universal dignity of all 320 million Americans is something that a free republic needs to pass on to the next generation. We need to get from them back to we.
I just want to ask you one more question. You write in the book that America isn't a skin pigment. It isn't an ethnicity or ethnic identity. America's an idea unless we let it devolve into something else. But part of what makes America great is that it is this grand, diverse experiment. The diversity is what makes this country strong and particularly unique. So can we have a conversation about these divisions, and while still sort of having a conversation about needed conversation about race and ethnicities and those differences? Sure.
I mean, obviously, we need to have all those conversations, but ultimately it has to be based on communities of love at the end of the day, right? You think about, remember the Titans. What happened there? They were on the same football team. Coach Boone, Denzel Washington's character, and I forget who the white guy was.
Language.
Like, we have another segment. My dad was a football and wrestling coach. Let's just talk about how sports can bring us together. You want to make America great again? We should all watch Remember the Titans together.
For sure, for sure. Before I let you go, Senator, just to channel one of my journalistic idols, Tim Russert, are you going to challenge Donald Trump for the presidency in 2020?
Oh, for heaven's sakes. I have 3 little kids, and when we ran for office in 2013, 2014, I think they vomited on the campaign bus in all 93 counties. If you thought about multiplying that times 50, I think my wife and I are out. So I think noxious weed control board of Dodge County, Nebraska is my more likely future.
So you're not running for the presidency?
I have very, very little interest in something like that. I got little kids.
All right. Will you come back and see us?
Thanks. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Thanks
thank
for having
you very
me.
much, Senator Sasse.
Thank
That
you.
was great. Awesome.
Great talking with you, Senator Sasse. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The book, of course, is called Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. It's available.